Well, hello everyone. I am Samantha Woodham, a family law barrister and co-founder of the Divorce Surgery, which is the only regulated service in England and Wales which enables separating couples to share a lawyer who advises them both. Now, at the Divorce Surgery, we do believe that legal advice plays an important role in divorce, but we're also very keen for couples to include other professional support from non-legal expertise to help them approach divorce with the right mindset and reshape their families in a way which is constructive and right for their family as a whole. Now, this week is Good Divorce Week, and I thought it would be great to record a conversation with a fellow professional who I have immense respect for. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Bill Hewlett. Bill is a post-separation family repair specialist. He's a mediator and a child consultant, and he helps separating parents to come to cooperative and collaborative agreements about their children. His primary focus is to shield children from excessive distress during this time of disruption by assisting the parents to foster an amicable alliance with each other. This is so important because children need to live in an atmosphere of calm and congruence if they are to reach their developmental potential. Bill, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's so lovely to have you here. It really is. And I just had a kind of few thoughts about things we could talk about. And to kick off the conversation, I really wanted to ask you what your definition of a good divorce would be.
Good divorce. You know, it's a funny thing. I was actually thinking recently about the idea that divorce is sort of seen as something that's not good, and getting married is kind of seen as a good thing. And in some ways, you know, people separating, relationships not lasting an entire lifetime is becoming increasingly common. So it's interesting that divorce is kind of perceived as something that's not a good thing. In many ways, it's just something that happens to people, a lot of people. And, you know, a divorce could be a time of enthusiastic optimism about what's possible in the future. It could be a great opportunity for people to finally maybe get their relationship into a state where they actually get on quite well. You know, a lot of people have struggled and been unhappy with each other for a really long time. And this is actually an opportunity to finally get the relationship into a state where they're actually, as co-parents, maybe not living together anymore, but as people who are both looking after the children, actually have a relationship with each other that's really quite good, amicable, collaborative. Why not?
I love this aspect of what you're saying, and I totally agree with it. This idea that actually a divorce or a separation, whatever you call it, is an evolution, and this can be the start of something better and different. And we have so many negative associations with the word divorce, but they're all self-imposed by us, aren't they? And we just need to break down that stigma and see it for what it is, which is just a life change.
Yeah, I mean, it's a time for the family to kind of reshape itself. You know, it's an opportunity for everybody to perhaps finally live a life that is more in accordance with what they maybe always wanted. You know, people get together in a relationship and it seems fine, and they work out certain ways of being with each other. Over time, maybe that relationship's not working so well. Maybe they don't feel so great about each other. It's a great opportunity to kind of reinvent the family in some new form, you know, maybe different houses, lots of things that maybe people have wanted. Now it's an opportunity for it to happen. They just need to articulate, just need to know, which of course means that the way they feel while they're working out how they're going to do that needs to be a good one. It needs to be a positive one. It needs to be one where they feel good about being there and happy to talk and wanting to think, let's see how we could make it really good. So it needs to come with a sense of optimism, I think, a sense of positivity.
I often kind of, you know, think to myself, why have we allowed divorce to have such a negative image when 42% of marriages end up going through it, you know. And a lot of it is about the language, I think, as well, that we use when we think about divorce is all quite negative, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas when, you know, hearing you talk about it just now, it's just so optimistic and hopeful. And if we all had those kind of associations with divorce, it probably wouldn't start off on such a tricky track.
Yeah, well, you know, it's an interesting phenomenon. They say in, you know, sort of therapists often talk about how an interaction between two people is very much driven by how it begins. So what they call a soft and a harsh startup. So if a relationship, two people talking, begins well, soft, it ends well. If it begins in a harsh point, criticism or something unkind or something doesn't make you feel good, it's unlikely the conversation will go well. Well, I think we can kind of think about that in relation to how people manage divorce. If you started well, it will probably end well. So if you come, you know, with this idea that, hey, you know, things have changed, we need to rejig our family, we need to change things around a bit according to how we'd ideally like them to be. If they begin with that sort of premise, then what could possibly go wrong? You know, we've only got two people, both parents, both want their kids to be okay, both want the situation between the two of them to be better. Why wouldn't it be?
And I mean, when you kind of think about what needs to happen, you know, what's holding us back as a society from kind of being positive and having this positive messaging, is it just a big education piece, do you think? Or what needs to happen in society for us to shift?
Look, I definitely think there needs to be a lot more education. I do think that, you know, we underplay or pay insufficient attention to the fact that if things get difficult between mum and dad, if things get sort of hostile and angry, there really are some awful long-term serious consequences for children. So I really think it's very important that we do understand a lot more about what happens to children. It's also really important to understand what happens to people who are in relationships that don't work out. You know, it's a common story. You go to a group, there's other people talking about what happened to them, and you think, wow, that's the same for me. It's, you know, like what's happening is not unusual, but the sense of personal hurt, the sense of personal kind of experience, and feeling very alone and feeling very kind of like you've made a mistake, maybe ashamed, maybe, you know, feeling bad about what's happened. You know, we need to realize that this is what's happening to everyone. Lots of people are feeling like this. So I think a deeper, broader, wider understanding and appreciation as to what happens when people get to this point in their lives needs to be known and understood, and then for people will feel less, you know, is there something wrong with me? And
Yeah.
No, this is just how it happens.
This is normal. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of what you were saying about just understanding the impact on children and the impact on adults of what going through a high conflict separation can be. And I was thinking about the research that was done in 2019 now by the Family Justice Observatory, where they found that, you know, as a profession, we thought about 10% of separating couples end up in court over their child arrangements. And that research found that actually it's as high as 38%, which is really shocking. And research looked at the impact that has on the adults and on the children in terms of the emotional harm these kind of high conflict proceedings are causing. And it called it out as a public health issue. That we have so many adults and children kind of putting themselves through this.
Absolutely.
And we need to kind of get to couples, don't we? And think about what can be done. And I was wondering, because I know you work with families across the kind of spectrum. So from very early stage who are maybe just considering separation and really want to do it well, to the other extreme who've been in, you know, entrenched litigation for some time and are just desperate to find a way out. And I just wonder, from that work that you've done with couples who've ended up in court, thinking about what is it that drives couples to court, and what can we do to stop it?
You know, it's a funny thing. I was thinking about how if people have spent a lot of time and money renovating a house, when they want to sell the house, they want to get back the money they spent renovating it. Yeah. And I think there's this thing about relationships where people feel they put a lot of time and effort into the relationship, and they want to be recompensed for it. and they want to have, you know, they want to have all that they've kind of put into them given back. But of course, if you are kind of using a legal process, the main focus will be on, you know, behavior and whether people have done bad things or not. And so, you know, we don't really attend to that sort of emotional requirement that people have, which drives them to want to go to court. People want to vindication. They want some person in authority to say, you've been really badly treated. You know, that whole issue. I mean, recently, Samantha Woodham was talking about, this is a relationship issue, not a legal one. Mm. And really, the courts don't have the time, the mechanisms, the necessary knowledge to assist people with what are essentially relationship problems. So I just think the whole idea of, you know, like people, you know, have this unhappiness, this point they want to make, you know, you never did this, or I did all this and you never helped. You know, they kind of want a judge to kind of make a decision about whether or not they're good people, whereas actually they can get it from the other person. A good process will involve the other person at some point acknowledging their experience.
I think it's just such a good point, because I see it so often in court proceedings, you know, where I'm involved on one side or the other. And I know that really what one of the parties wants is some recognition by the other. You know, it might just be a thanks, it may be a recognition for a sacrifice that's been made. And they're not getting it, and their communication has completely broken down, you know, so they're not even speaking, and it's not something their lawyers can get for them through correspondence, and it's also not something a judge will give them. You know, when you go into the family courts, judges don't pronounce winners and losers. You know, they are just looking for a pragmatic solution for a family, and actually they generally bend over backwards not to pronounce somebody as the better parent, because they don't want that to become the narrative for the family. So it's an incredibly blunt tool, but it's an also very ineffective tool in getting what you want, which is generally, as you say, some kind of recognition, or that there'll be some issue that's underlying all of this, that one person really wants to be recognised, or quite often both want different things recognised. And going to court just isn't somewhere where that can be achieved.
No, that's right. I mean, and also, you know, it's true to say, I think, that if you come across someone who's really struggling in a relationship, you'll often find that their parents struggled as well. So there's this kind of intergenerational kind of thing that gets handed from one to the next. You know, like I'll often say to my clients, you know, like, so what was your childhood like? And it'll turn out that it wasn't that great, and then their parents' relationship wasn't that great either. So what's happened is people in their childhoods have experienced difficult times, and it's made having relationships difficult. And therefore, you know, if this is all coming from the fact that people have kind of experienced some degree of trauma and it's made relationships difficult, trying to work out who's wrong and who's right is never going to result in a good outcome. It really requires a great deal of kindness and generosity and compassion and patience. If people are in trouble in their relationships through no fault of their own, they grew up in an environment where getting good at relationships wasn't an option. Again, you know, it's like this should be an entirely different way of treating what are effectively symptoms of people who've had difficult childhoods.
I think also, you know, when I think about relationship breakdown, or I don't really like that word, but change, or, you know, moving on, we don't have very many examples. You know, even just thinking about my own personal network, like my friends, my family. I mean, none of us know many people who have navigated this well. You know, and so it's really hard in those circumstances when you're looking at your friendship group or your family network or the celebrity world or whatever it is, and thinking, okay, right, I really want to do this well. Show me somebody who has. How did they do it? There are so few people who do it and talk about it, you know, and it's really interesting when I I did an article about conscious uncoupling and the Gwyneth Paltrow experience, and she wrote a really amazing essay about it recently, actually. And then I read this book by Glennon Doyle called Untamed, where she talks about her divorce, and again, the positive experience of divorce and how it was an opportunity to reconnect with her husband, you know, and their amazing co-parenting relationship, and all of this stuff that has been achieved through this quite bumpy road. And, you know, she acknowledges that. But I just think, gosh, if we had more examples of what it feels like, and that, you know, there'll be bits that are bumpy. It's harder to work together than it is to work against each other. But fundamentally, you can achieve great things by doing that. I think that's also what's hard, isn't it? As a society, we just don't have that many examples around us of somebody who's done it successfully.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, in the UK, going to a lawyer first thing when things are starting to unravel is kind of the standard practice that you follow, and the lens you look through determines what you see. You know, so the reason that, you know, the reason that sometimes I get a referral, and the referral, they're kind of indicating me, oh, this guy's really tough, or this woman's really angry, or whatever, and I meet them and I realize that they've been made more angry or more tough because of the process that they've been in.
Yeah.
You know, so no wonder we don't see many people that are able to show us great examples as to how to separate, because what's on offer, generally speaking, isn't anything other than a kind of a process that makes you more angry.
Right, and divisive. And, you know, it's so funny, whenever I get asked about this, I always try and say, you know, a lawyer is not the first person to go and see. There are so many people to go and see first, including, you know, relationship counselors, divorce coaches, financial advisors. Understand, you know, empower yourself about your financial perspective. A lawyer is really low on the list, but you're right. It's kind of, you know, hard-lined into our psyche. Oh, I'm getting divorced, I need a lawyer, I need to issue a petition. No, you need to step back, unless you're in a position where you're not safe, where it's quite different. But unless you're in that situation, actually what you need to do is take a breath and start this right. And that means starting it with the right support to get you into the right mindset, because you're so right. I so agree with what you say about the self-fulfilling prophecy. I think if you start something thinking this is going to be contentious and awful, it's going to be contentious and awful, because the first time you hit a bump in the road, you'll think, here I am in this awful process, just as I imagined. Whereas if you think, you know what, this is going to be okay, and there may be tricky parts where it's hard to work together, but if we stick at it, we're going to be all right, then you'll come out with that mentality too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you know, how you begin, as we were saying before, determines where you end up. Beginning well, beginning with a positive, strength-based commitment to, and very clearly understanding that if you want the kids to be okay, as parents, you need to look after each other. And I know that's the last thing people want to do, but if kids experience their parents undermining each other, if kids experience their parents feeling bad about each other, then the kids are going to have to deal with that. They're going to have to repair it. If dad's made mum feel really bad, the kids are going to have to help mum feel better. Yeah. And if mum's done something to dad and made him really sad or whatever, the kids are going to have to step in and cheer dad up. So helping the parents understand the best way to look after your children is for you guys to look after each other. And I know that kind of goes against every part of what they're feeling, because the relationship's broken down, they're angry, they're hurt, they're upset. It kind of seems very counterintuitive. But being mindful of the fact that children's very well-being, their welfare, their capacity to thrive as people very much depends on mum and dad being able to bring out the best in each other, even though this is a really tough time.
I totally agree with that. And I think that something I always try and stress as well with clients is that, you know, we all obviously should understand that it's really important for children to have both their parents involved. But I also try and get people to think about the adult loss in not having a cooperative co-parenting relationship, because when it comes to your child, you know, no one is going to have your back like the other co-parent, unless you're extremely unlucky and you've been in a very unsafe situation. But, you know, the person to call at 3 a.m. when that child is running a fever is the co-parent. And And it's just such a loss of that support. You know, if you get yourself in a situation where you don't have a civil cooperative relationship with your co-parent, you're putting so much onto yourself in terms of burden that then builds resentment in itself.
That's really true. I hadn't really thought about it, but that's definitely true. That, you know, and the whole thing about ringing the other parent, you know, the child's feverish and you're worried and you're upset and you're thinking, will I ring the other parent or not? Now, if you had a scent that the other parent would say, you know, thank you for ringing, I really feel appreciative that you've included me, you know, you pick up the phone straight away.
Yeah.
So helping people understand what sort of response do you need to get if you ring up at 3 o'clock in the morning? Yeah. How would you like that person to behave towards you? How would you like to feel? How would you like to think they think of you as a person or a parent? And just putting that in place for them means that of course they'll ring, because why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And that can be sorted in no time at all between people.
Now, I wanted to move on a little bit to, there is a report done by the Family Solutions Group, which is a subgroup of a private law working group that's headed by Mr. Justice Cobb, that was set up in response actually to this Nuffield report, which showed that so many parents, you know, so many more parents than we thought are ending up in court. And the remit really was, you know, what can we do to respond to this crisis? And the Family Solutions reports come out. I know we've both read it, and it's a long document, but you know, the nub really is all about, okay, what can we do? What early intervention can we put in place to enable parents to work together to reach the right solutions for their children, rather than ending up in court as a kind of default because they're not talking and they're not given the support they need to get there. And I guess I just sort of wanted to know from you, I mean, I know we all love early advice, right? We're all into early intervention, but just thinking about the importance of that, you know, for a couple understanding if they're going through separation or thinking about separating, why is it so important for them to get some early support, not necessarily from a lawyer, but from a kind of co-parenting expert about how they approach this next chapter in their relationship as co-parents rather than just as married people?
Well, I think that if they are able to have a kind of a broad understanding, I suppose, about what's going on. I think what happens, you know, when life doesn't go well for us, we become very narrow in terms of our thinking. You know, we just maybe hold someone else responsible or blame them, or, you know, we kind of lose perspective. And I think any process that allows us to kind of just hold off for a second before we kind of launch into our own personal take on what's happened and have the opportunity to consider this from a broader perspective, then we will go into that process more informed, more aware of a lot of the kind of ingredients that lead to us being in conflict with each other. Being in conflict is kind of what humans do often when life doesn't work out. It's kind of like an old, very well, deeply established reaction in us that goes back to when we were living in a much more dangerous world than we do now. Being right and refusing to countenance that we might not be anything other than 100% right is a natural kind of human reaction to things not going well. And if there weren't any kids in the mix, well, I guess that's a way to recover. But when people have to be right and means the other person has to be wrong, and there are children in that mix, that's a very dangerous way to recover from something not working out. So I just feel that being able to access a broader perspective, being able to reconsider perhaps the take you have on what's happened, be reflective, allow yourself to have some insights perhaps into your part in what's happened and how others might have felt, rather than just dropping into a very simple blaming narrative that just says the answer to every question lies in the bad character of the other person. You know, it doesn't matter where they go, as long as they get that opportunity to think again and reconsider and look at this from a broader perspective.
I think that kind of big picture thing is so important, actually, because if you can get something from day one that you share in terms of an aspiration, you know, a shared big picture aspiration, I think you're much, much less likely to, because I often find that the kind of positions and the positional nature that people get to once they've really been in litigation for a while, and it becomes so granular, you know, it's 6 nights, a fortnight, or 7, or whatever it is, that's happened because they don't have a shared vision of what this is going to be like. And also there's been, you know, maybe fear engendered on one side or other that they're being marginalized as a parent. And, you know, being able to start this, not thinking, how many nights do I want, or who's going to take the child to ballet, but thinking, what's our vision, you know, as co-parents for what this relationship is going to be like and what our children's experience is going to be, then I think you're much less likely to resort to those sorts of trivial, actually, arguments about specifics, because you'll just kind of broadly agree and you'll be flexible. And that's the hope, isn't it? That we can create a scenario where co-parents don't need granular court orders to be able to communicate and agree arrangements which are bound to be, you know, naturally flex over time.
Yeah. I mean, you can't legislate the relationship. And I think, you know, what we do as a species when we're upset is we always try to describe our upset through events and occasions and behaviors and significant things that occurred. So, you know, you were late picking me up, or you did this, or you did that. We're trying to do that to communicate something much more deep, which is, I feel hurt. I feel let down. I feel abandoned. I feel that you don't care about me. But we frame those comments in language that is about an event, a thing that happened. And of course, the other person doesn't like being criticized or told that they're not a good person. And, you know, so they react by going, well, no, I didn't do that thing on that day. You know, like, you're wrong. So that kind of emotional thing that we're trying to communicate to the other person, which is, I feel hurt, gets lost in detail.
Yeah.
Then if the courts get all caught up in the detail as well, we're all missing the point.
Yes.
That people feel hurt. And actually doing something about feeling hurt is quite easily attended to. If we can find some way to acknowledge that person's hurt, 80% of the hurt is gone.
Yeah.
Like that. You know, it's so simple. And you know, people go through these long, arduous, complicated, expensive, aggressive adversarial process, and they just wanted someone to say, you're right. You were hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other one goes, well,
I'm
actually,
sorry.
you were.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Oops.
Yeah. I'll put the kettle on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We're good now. So really, you know, anything that stops people from getting to that point of being able to cut to the chase and attend to that really very, you know, human message, emotional message of a human experience, and having that message heard and having that message acknowledged, getting to that quickly will stop us from going through long, adversarial, awful, drawn out processes that really don't ever give us that sense of, like we were saying before, you never get that sense of acknowledgement from a process like that. Just goes
so really, I mean, really what, you know, the ideal for couples is that, you know, they'd have at the beginning a conversation, right, that's helpful and maybe enabled by a therapeutic professional, but a conversation about the relationship and what they want the narrative, what the legacy of that relationship is, and, you know, what they need explaining about the ending, and so that they can rationalize it themselves and deal with all of that emotion. Because once that's dealt with, or at least rationalized, then they can start thinking logically about big decisions and legal advice and all of those things. But if the emotion is ruling everything else because of all the things that are unsaid and unheard, then it's hopeless, actually.
Yeah. And you know, that that sense of having that conversation where we get to find out that actually, to some extent, the problem here is not so much our characters, but more the way our relationship managed our differences. I mean, everybody's got differences. Everybody's got different ideas about parenting. Everyone's got different ideas about education and health. You know, strong core belief systems that we all have, we hold dear to us. Now, when we speak about those things that really matter to us and the other person doesn't agree, we can often feel very hurt. We feel personally attacked when they say, I don't believe in private school, or I think, you know, the army's a terrible place. Like, we personally feel very kind of belittled because that person has attacked what something is very core to us. Finding a way of being able to discuss those core issues without being in conflict, finding a way to realize that your relationship did not manage the fact that you had some differences well at all. Your relationship actually ended up with you both feeling quite criticized and quite poorly treated and quite sort of aggressively, you know, portrayed. Your relationship let you down. I think if people are able to get the opportunity to realize that their relationship really wasn't equipped to deal with people with complex needs such as they had. And, you know, it's almost not the relationship's fault because it tried the best it could, but it only had so much equipment at its disposal. So, you know, being given the opportunity to realize that we've been let down by many things and we came into this relationship in good faith and we both tried as hard as we could. But this relationship did not allow us to see the effort the other person was making. For some reason, it set us up to be in this competitive situation where we're always kind of fighting for our voice. You know, that's the relationship's fault, not the people's fault. So I think, again, people having the opportunity to see this in the context of that and realize that they've been let down by a relationship that didn't facilitate their differences well.
Yeah, and that it's just a relationship and it's the way that that's evolved, and they can still draw real positives from all the shared memories they've made. And this is an opportunity now for a change and new beginnings, but also retaining, particularly they've got children, but retaining some of the good in the relationship, the things they were doing well, and building on that. And sort of, you know, I think it's so good to have a positive story about your relationship and not see it as a failure and not see it as it's just something that happened and there were good parts, but now you've both, you know, you've grown up, you've changed, and that's okay. And this relationship isn't working anymore, and that's okay. And it doesn't mean that one of you has done something wrong. It just means that it's not working now. That's fine. There's going to be new adventures around the corner. You know, life, we never know what's coming. So let's hold on to the good, and we can let go of the bits that were causing us upset and hurt, and move on. And not try and sort of rule out everything that went before as, oh, this was this terrible mistake, this whole relationship was wrong. It wasn't, but it just isn't working now, and that's okay. Yeah.
Sometimes I quite like the analogy of two people, you know, going to a car yard and buying a car together. Looked like a great car, you know, it's all shiny. And anyway, they took them on this long drive and it turned out the car was a lemon, you know, it just didn't work. You spend the rest of your life blaming each other for the fact you bought the car. You know, bought it in good faith. You gave it your best shot. So really, you know, it's kind of like important to get the thing that needs to take responsibility here, which is the relationship, rather than the people.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Just kind of one last thing, because I could talk to you all afternoon, but if we have, you know, we may well have couples watching this who are thinking about separating or very early stages of the process, and if they're thinking, you know, we love this out, you know, we want to do it well, we want to be amicable, we don't want to fall out, what would your kind of one message or your top tip for them be?
Well, definitely try to begin the process of working out what you're going to do by consulting someone who will give you the opportunity to, you know, express your point of view. I think it's very important that everybody feels that they've been heard, and avail themselves of a process whereby they can gain a broader perspective. You know, I mean, if you can become part of some sort of collaborative team, some sort of bunch of people who can kind of work in sync with each other, then that is highly recommended. I would suggest that you find people who can offer a variety of services. You need the law, you need legal advice, you need to know where you stand, you need to know how to manage your finances, you need to know how best to manage your parenting. These are all things that you should get some help with. It's not, we don't do this every day, so it's not something we're all kind of getting to practice. So seeking out people who are very committed to helping you as quickly as possible work stuff out so that you can get on with your lives and your children can be relatively unblemished. So yeah, seek out someone who's obviously very overtly kind of making that message clear.
Yeah, that is so helpful. Thank you so much for joining me, Bill. It's been such a pleasure. We have these conversations all the time, but it's so nice that we've actually been able to record this one and share it with a wider audience. Yeah. I'm really grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a good chat.